How many cars did he pull this stunt with? Well, he doesn't really remember, but Charlie says we can reconstruct it from the records, the NV1s and so on. It will just take time. Of course, Nelson didn't approach every customer with this sort of shady deal. He had to pick and choose, the ones that looked poor enough not to look a gift horse in the face. He was clever about it. Nelson is much more clever than you ever gave him credit for. I never said the kid wasn't clever. Oh, but Harry... The shell of tears is refreshed. The brown eyes spill. Shiny trails glitter beside her blunt little knob of a nose with no more character than a drawer pull. She tugs a paper facial tissue from the box the hospital puts on his night table. As she leans forward, he glimpses the tops of her tidy breasts through the loose neck of the magenta peasant-style blouse he has never seen before, something she has bought for the real estate course, and these meetings with Charlie, and her general stepping out into the world without him. He feels a flash of unpleasant heat, as in catheterization. His own wife's tits surprising him like that. Janice dabbles at her face, her muddled mutt's face, and leans even farther forward, so he feels her breath on his face, smells some faint mint of a lifesaver, to hide the tobacco on her breath. Her tears shine under his eyes. Her shaky voice is low, so only he can hear. He didn't even stop with that. He was doing crack by this time, and the amount of money he needed was incredible. He and Lyle worked out this scheme. Here it gets very technical. Wait, he tells her. The culinary aide has come in to remove his tray. She is a plump Hispanic woman with long red fingernails and a distinct mustache. You no eat enough, she scolds, with her shy smile of pearl-sized teeth. Enough, he says, for now. Very good. Bueno. She has a notebook on which she writes the percentages of the food he has consumed. A third of the overcooked watery string beans, half the pale oval of tasteless veal, scarcely a leaf of the coarse green salad drowned in an orange grease, a bite of the tapioca pudding, whose wobbly texture in his mouth made him shudder. For breakfast, she reads from her clipboard, pieces pineapple, cream of wheat, whole wheat toast, coffee decaf. I can hardly wait, he tells her. Eat more now, she suggests. He holds firm. No thanks, too cold now. My wife's here. She reads from the chart. Says here, last day tomorrow. How about that, Harry asks her. The big wide world, I'll miss you, and all your healthy eats. As she removes his plastic tray, her long red fingernails scrape on its underside with a noise that puts his teeth on edge. He is reminded of that platinum-haired bimbo who used to tickle the computer keys at Fiscal Alternatives. Her fingernails were too long, too. Dead, Lyle said. If there is an afterlife where the dead all gather, would he get a chance to deepen their acquaintance? But without money around, what would they talk about? When the woman goes, Janice resumes. The tip of her tongue protrudes a second or so between her lips as she tries to think. I'm not sure I understand it entirely, but you know how we keep a rolling inventory. So many trucks and vans and cars a month from Mid-Atlantic Toyota in Maryland. Between 20 and 25 a month is how it's been running, Harry tells her, to let her know he may be flat on his back but knew his business. We haven't been able to move 300 new units a year except that one year, 86, after Nelson first took over. The strong yen's been killing us, and Honda and Nissan taking a bigger bite. Ford Ranger put a real dent in our one-ton pickup last year. Harry, try to focus. The way it was explained to me is that there's this Toyota Motors Credit Corporation in California that finances our inventory direct with Mid-Atlantic and gets paid when we sell a car and adds to our credit account when we order one for the lot. What Nelson was doing, each month he'd report 1 or 2 sales fewer than there actually were, and so Toyota would roll over the indebtedness on these cars while he and Lyle put the proceeds in a separate account they'd opened up in the company name. You know how banks now are always offering you all these different accounts, savings and checking with savings and capital accounts with limited checks and so on. So every month we'd owe this TMCC for 1 or 2 more cars than were actually on the lot, and our debt to them kept getting bigger, and our actual inventory was getting smaller. In 2 or 3 years, if nothing had happened, we would have had no new cars in stock at all and owed Mid-Atlantic Toyota a fortune. How much do we actually owe 'em? His mind can't quite assign weight to these facts, these phantom Toyotas, yet. He is still thinking hospital thoughts, the pineapple he's been promised for breakfast, and whether or not he has taken his digitalis for the evening. Nobody knows, Harry. Nelson doesn't exactly remember, and Lyle says a lot of the disks he was keeping the accounts on have been accidentally erased. Accidentally on purpose, as they used to say, he says. What a shit. What a pair of shits. I know, it's horrible, Janice says, and Lyle is horrible on the phone. He says he's dying and doesn't care what we do to him. He sounded kind of crazy in the head. Isn't that one of the things that happens? The weight of the facts hits her and bears her down suddenly into hysteria. The tears flow, accompanied by sobs, and she tries to rest her wet face on his blanketed chest, but she is too short, perched on the chair beside his high bed, and instead presses her eyes and mouth against the hard mattress edge, burbling her disbelief that he would do this to her. He means Nelson. Harry is off the hook for once. In her grief, her whole head is hot, even the top of her skull, like a pot come to boil. He comfortingly rubs it through her little new hairdo and tries not to smile. Serve them both right, he thinks. Springers. Her dark hair with its gray strands is so fine it sticks to his fingers like cobwebs. For a good 5 minutes he massages her warm, unhappy head with his fingertips while staring at the blank television screen and thinking that he is missing the 6 o'clock news, followed by national news at 6:30. Somehow he can't believe that what Janice is trying to tell him ranks with the national news for reality. She may be his wife, but she's no Connie Chung, let alone Diane Sawyer, with her wide-apart blue eyes and melting mouth and stunned look like some beautiful blonde ox. So what's going to happen, he asks Janice at last. She lifts her tear-smeared face and, surprisingly, has some answers. Charlie must have been coaching her. Well, once we found out how much we owe TMCC, we'll have to settle up. We've been paying interest on the inventory, so they shouldn't care too much. It's like a mortgage, only Nelson has sold the house without telling them. If he faked any signatures, that's forgery, Harry says, and a black dye of despair is beginning to enter his heart as he sees what a lost cause his son is. Human garbage, like his own father once said of him. He asks, "What's going to happen with the kid?" Janice blinks her wet lashes. What she has to say seems to her so momentous she withholds it a moment. Her voice has the juicy precision Ma Springer would speak with when she had made up her mind. He's agreed to enter a rehab place, immediately. Good, I guess. What made him agree? I said it was either that or I'd fire him from the lot. And prosecute. Wow, you said that? I did, Harry. I made myself. To your own son? I had to. He's been thinking, and he knows it. He was grateful, really. We had it out right there on the lot, out where the weeds are, while Charlie and the accountant stayed inside. Then we made some phone calls from your old office. Where is this rehab place? In North Philadelphia. It's the one his counselor recommends if he can get Nelson in. They're all overcrowded, you know. Society can't keep up. There are some day treatment programs in Brewer, but his counselor says the important thing is to get away from the entire environment the drugs are part of. So he really did go to a counselor after that blow-up with Prue. Yes, to everybody's surprise. And even more surprisingly, Nelson seems to like him. Respect him. It's a black man. Harry feels a jealous, resentful pang. His boy is being taken over. His fatherhood hasn't been good enough. They're calling in the professionals. For how long is the rehab? The complete program is 90 days. The first month is detox and intensive therapy. And then he lives in a halfway house for 60 days and gets some kind of a job. A community service sort of thing, probably, just something to get him back out into the normal world. He'll be gone all summer. Who'll run the lot? Janice puts her hand over his, a gesture that feels to him learned, coached. You will, Harry. Honey, I can't. I'm a sick son of a bitch. Charlie says your attitude is terrible. You're giving in to your heart. He says the best thing is a positive spirit and lots of activity. Yeah, why doesn't he come back and run the lot if he's so fucking active? He has all these other fish to fry these days. Yeah, and you seem to be one of them. I'm hearing you sizzle. She giggles, along with the ugly tears drying on her face. Don't be so silly. He's just an old friend who's been wonderful in this crisis. While I've been useless, right? You've been in the hospital, dear. You've been being brave in your own way. Anyway, as we all know, there are things you can't do for me. Only I can do them for myself. He is disposed to argue this. It sounds pious in a new-fashioned way he distrusts. But if he's ever going to get back into the game, he must let up and avoid aggravation. He asks, How did Nelson take your getting tough? Like I said, he liked it. He's just been begging for the rest of us to take over. He knew he was way out of control. Prue is thrilled to think he's going to get help. Judy is thrilled. Is Roy thrilled? He's too little to understand, but as you say yourself, the atmosphere around that house has been poisonous. Did I say poisonous? She doesn't bother to answer. She has straightened up and is wiping her face with a licked facial tissue. Will I have to see the kid before he goes? No, baby. He's going tomorrow morning before we bring you home. Good. I just don't know as I could face him. When you think of what he's done, he's flushed the whole bunch of us, not just you and me, but his kids, everybody, right down the toilet. He sold us all out to a stupid drug. Well, my goodness, Harry, I've known you to act selfishly in your life. Yeah, but not for a little white powder. They can't help it. It becomes their life. Anyway, evidently they were buying drugs for Lyle, too. I mean drugs for his illness, medicines for AIDS you can't buy yet in this country and are terribly expensive. They have to be smuggled. It's a sad story, Rabbit says after a pause. Inky depression circulates in his veins. He's been in the hospital too long. He's forgotten what life is like. He asks Janice, "Where are you going now in that snappy blouse?" She rolls her eyes upward at him from the mirror of her purse as she fixes her face, and then her face goes wooden and stubborn, bluffing it through. Charlie said he'd take me out to dinner. He's worried I'm going to crash, psychologically, after all this trauma. I need to process. Process? Talk things through. You can talk them through with me. I'm just lying here with nothing to do. I've already missed the sports section of the news. She makes that mouth women make after putting on lipstick, rolling her lips together in a complacent, serious way, and tells him, "You're not impartial. You have your own agenda with Nelson, and with me, for that matter." What's so impartial about Charlie? He wants to get into your pants again, if he hasn't already. She pops the lipstick back into her bomb-shaped pocketbook and touches up her new hairdo with her fingers, glancing from several angles at herself in the mirror, and snaps the lid shut. She says, "That's sweet of you, Harry, to pretend to think I'm still interesting to anybody in that way, but in fact I'm not, except maybe once in a while to my own husband, I hope." He says, embarrassed, for he knows he's been letting her down in that department lately, "Sure, but you know, for a man it's all a matter of blood pressure, and—" "We'll talk about it when you're home. I told Charlie I'd meet him at 7. "Where? The salad bar that used to be Johnny Fry's? It's only 2 blocks from here. You can walk." "No, actually. There's a new Vietnamese place out near Maiden Springs he wanted to try. It's a bit of a drive, and you know me, I'll probably get lost. And then on top of everything, I have 50 pages of a book on British realty law, full of all these funny old obsolete words I have to read before tomorrow night." "You won't be home tomorrow night? My first night home?" He is making a complaint of it, scoring points, but he wishes she'd go and leave him alone with the television screen. "We'll see," Janice says, rising. "I have an idea." Then she asks, "Aren't you proud of me?" She bends forward to press her hot, busy face against his. "Managing everything the way I am?" "Yeah," he lies. He preferred her incompetent. She leaves with her jonquil yellow new coat over her arm, and he thinks she is gaining weight behind. She has that broad-beamed look women of the county wear when they come into their own. Harry watches what is left of Tom Brokaw and is settling into a 7 o'clock show on life in Antarctica when, of all people, the Harrisons come visiting. Not just Thelma. She's brought Ron along, or Ron has brought her, since she is thinner and sallower than he has ever seen her, and moves as if every step might break a bone. She smiles regretfully. Her eyes apologize for the shape she's in, for Ronnie's being with her, for her being unable to stay away. "We were here in the hospital seeing my doctor," she explains, "and Ron Jr. had heard you were in." "For what they call a little procedure," he says, and gestures toward the chair Janice has pulled up to the bed and that's probably still warm from her broad beam. "Ron, there's that big padded chair over in the corner if you want to pull it over. It's on wheels." "I'll stand," he says. "We can only stay a minute." He is sullen, but Rabbit didn't ask the Harrisons to come visit and doesn't see why he should be bullied. "Suit yourself?" He asks Thelma. "How are you?" Thelma sighs elaborately. "You know doctors. They never admit they don't have an answer. I'm on home dialysis twice a week. Ronnie's a saint to put up with me. He took a course on how to cope with the machine." Ronnie was always a saint, Harry tells her. Everybody in the room knowing that Ronnie Harrison was just about his least favorite person in the world, though he had known him from kindergarten. A dirty-mouthed plug-ugly even at the age of 5, and now bald as a prick's tip, with wisps above his big droopy ears. Ronnie in high school and afterward had a certain chunkiness, but the approach of old age has pulled the chunkiness like taffy, leaving hollows in his face and lumps and a painful stringiness around the throat. Harry says, as if she doesn't already know, "Janice is taking courses, too, to learn how to sell real estate. I guess so she has a trade in case I pop off." Thelma's eyelids flutter. A bony hand wearing a wedding ring gestures the possibility away. The sicker she gets, the more dried out and school-teacherish she looks. That was one of the jokes of her being his mistress, her looking so prim and being so wild in bed. But maybe the real her was the school-teacher, and the other was put on for him, like an insect imitating a flower. "Harry, you're not going to pop off," she tells him urgently, afraid for him. That strange way women have of really caring about somebody beyond themselves. They do wonderful things with hearts now. They stitch and mend them just like rag dolls. She manages a thin smile. "Want to see what I have?" He thinks he knows what she has, all of it, but she unbuttons her sleeve, and with that matter-of-fact bearing which was her style, Thelma shows him the underside of her bared arm. 2 purple bruised patches on her slender wrist are connected by a translucent U of some plastic tubing taped flat against the jaundiced skin. "That's called my shunt," she says, pronouncing the last word carefully. "It connects an artery and vein, and when I have the dialysis we take it off and connect me to the machine." Pretty, seems all he can say. He tells them about his angioplasty, but is already tired of describing it, and trying to convey the creepy business of seeing the dark shadow of the catheter like a snaky forefinger inch ever more intimately into his heart's paler, trembling shades. "My coronary artery could have occluded, and I could have gone into CA. Cardiac arrest." "But you didn't, you jerk," Ronnie says, standing erect and abandoning his shadow on the wall. "The old master," he says, a sardonic phrase he used to kid Harry with in their basketball-playing days. Funny, all of his life Harrison has been shadowing Harry with a fleshly mockery, a reminder of everything sweaty and effortful Rabbit hoped squeamishly to glide over and avoid. Nobody lays a finger on the old master. He makes it all look easy. Ronnie used to resent how Marty Totherow would put him, Ronnie, into the game when the bruisers on the other side were roughing Harry up to give rough stuff back. An enforcer, they call it now. "It was never as easy as I made it look," Rabbit tells him. He turns to Thelma, wanting to be tender, since she had braved her husband's anger by bringing him here. She had never balked at humiliating Ronnie to give Harry her gift of love, and indeed, sick as the two lovers are, her nearness does give him that socketed feeling you have with certain women, that graceful feeling you can do no wrong. "How about you, Thel? Your docs think you're licking it?" "Oh, they never say die, but a body gets tired. You can fight only so long. The pains I can live with, and the weakness all the time, but the kidneys going is really demoralizing. It takes away your pleasure in life if you can't take such things for granted. Harry, you know that part of the Bible they used to read to us in assembly before the Bible got outlawed, about a time for everything? A time to gather up stones, a time to cast them away. I'm beginning to think there's a time to give up." "Thel, don't say that," Ronnie says, with an urgency of his own. He loves this woman, too, also calls her Thel. It occurs to Harry that 2 men for a woman and vice versa is about right, just as we need 2 kinds of days, work days and holidays, and day and night. Ronnie sounds angry that she would talk of giving up, but this May evening is slowly melting him into the shadowy wall. So it is beginning to seem that Harry and Thelma are alone together, as in so many stolen afternoons, their hearts beating, the school buses braking outside on the curved street, and as in that room in the Caribbean, their first time together, when they stayed awake until dawn, and then fell asleep as one, as the tropical blue air between the louvers paled and the palm trees ceased their nighttime stirring. Ronnie's disembodied voice says angrily, "You have 3 boys who want to see you grow old." Thelma smiles slyly at Harry, her face colorless and waxy in the May day, fading above the fancy brickwork cornices and chimneys visible through the windows. "Why would they want to see that, Ron?" she asks mischievously, not taking her gaze from Harry's face. "They're grown men. I've done all I can do for them." Poor Ron has no answer. Maybe he's choked up. Rabbit takes pity and says to him, "How's the insurance business going, Ron?" "It's leveled out," his voice says gruffly. "Not bad, not good. The S&L mess hurt some companies, but not ours. At least people have stopped borrowing against their policies at 5% and investing at 10 the way they were. That was killing our figures. One of the nice things about getting to be old geezers like us," Harry says, "is people like you stop trying to sell me insurance." Footsteps and tingling pans sound from the hall, where the lights seem bright suddenly. Night has come. "Not necessarily," Ron is saying. "I could get you a pretty good deal on some 20-payment straight life if you and Janice are interested. I know a doctor who doesn't look too close. You've survived one coronary. That's in your favor. Let me work up some figures." Harry ignores him. To Thelma he says, "Your boys are in good shape?" "We think so. Good enough. Alex has had an offer from a high-tech place in Virginia outside Washington. Georgie thinks he has a spot with a musical comedy troupe in the Catskills this summer. Here's something Janice just told me. She's got Nelson to sign up for a drug rehab." "That's nice," Thelma says, so softly and sincerely here in the gloom that her voice seems to exist not in the air but already in his blood, inserted intravenously. All the afternoons, when their bodies intertwined and exchanged fluids, are not gone, but safe inside him, his cells remembering. "You're nice to say so," he says, and dares to grasp her cool hand, the one without the shunt, and move it up from her lap so the back of his own hand brushes a breast. Ronnie's voice comes forward from the wall. "We gotta go, Thel. Ron, thanks for bringing her by." "Anything for the old master. We were in the building." "Master of nothing at this point." Ronnie grunts. "Who's to say?" He's not all bad. Thelma has stiffly stood and, bending by his bed, asks, right out in front of Ronnie, "Darling, can you manage a little kiss?" He may imagine it, but Thelma's pale, cool, departing face, swiftly pressed against his, their lips meeting a bit askew, gives off a faint, far tang of urine. When he is alone in his room again, he remembers how sometimes, when he kissed Thelma good-bye at her house, her mouth would be flavored by the sour milk taste of his prick, the cheesy smegma secreted beneath his foreskin. She would be still all soft and blurred by their love-making and unaware, and he would try to conceal his revulsion, a revulsion at his own smell on her lips. It was like, another sad thing to remember, the time when Nixon, with Watergate leaking out all around him, during one of the oil crunches went on television to tell us so earnestly to turn our thermostats down, for not only would it save oil, but scientific studies showed that colder houses were healthier for us. That big, scowling, scared face on television, the lips wet and fumbling. Their president, crook or not, going down in disgrace, but trying to say what needed to be said. Harry, as a loyal American, did go and turn his thermostat down. Janice wakes up early out of nervousness. It is going to be a long and complicated day for her, of seeing Nelson off at 9, and picking Harry up at noon, and taking a quiz in British property law at 7, in the Brewer extension of Penn State, in a renovated, disused elementary school on South Pine Street, a section she isn't too easy about parking the car in at night. In Penn Park in mid-May, the day begins with a kiss of coolness, as in Florida. The little limestone house is cozier now that the surrounding trees are fully leafed. She has enjoyed, enough to add to her feelings of guilt, these days of Harry's being in the hospital, and her being free to come and go without explanation, and to get into bed as early or late as she pleases, and to watch what television shows she wants to. Wednesday nights, for instance, she likes unsolved mysteries. But Harry is always sitting beside her in the study or in bed, telling her how ridiculous these so-called mysteries are, and how they always derive, if you think about it, from the testimony of people who are either mentally unbalanced or have something to gain financially. The older Harry gets, the more cynical he is. He used to be religious in a funny way. They couldn't put the show on television if there weren't some truth to it, and that Robert Stack seems ever so sensible. Last night, what with being out with Charlie at that Vietnamese place along the Maiden Springs Pike, it was nice, but she never figured out what she was supposed to do with those bubbly, brittle rice things like warped pancakes that were so tasteless you must be supposed to dip them in something. She missed all but the last 10 minutes of 30-something, which she likes to watch Tuesdays because it's so different from how she was when she was 30-something, All those demands on her, mother, wife, daughter, and then being Charlie's mistress for a while, and feeling so inadequate and guilty, and having no female friends, really, except Peggy Fosnot, who went and slept with Harry anyway, and now is dead. Terrible to think, all rotten and parchmenty like a mummy in her casket. Too hideous for the mind to grasp, but it happens anyway, even to people your own age. With Harry gone, she can eat Campbell's chicken noodle soup cold out of the can if she wants, with a few Ritz crackers crushed in, and not have to worry about giving him a good balanced, low-fat sodium meal that he complains to her is tasteless. Maybe being a widow won't be so very bad, is the thought she keeps trying not to think. Last night it rained hard for an hour. She was kept awake by its drumming on the air-conditioner, and they say showers this evening again, though the sun is making a kind of tawny fog slanting across the yard through the neighbors' tall trees to where Harry has his little vegetable garden, in imitation of the one his parents had in the backyard on Jackson Road. All he grows is lettuce and carrots and kohlrabi. He does love to nibble. She sees with her coffee that Bryant and Willard are getting along better on the Today Show after that unfortunate thing with Bryant's private memo being exposed in all the papers. Really nothing's private anymore. The scandal-mongers never rest, always hoping for another Watergate. Her father's death was brought on by Watergate, she has always felt. The news is mostly about China and Gorbachev. You can never trust communists not to gang up on you, and Panama, where that evil pock-marked Noriega just won't leave, and how Pennsylvania voters yesterday turned down the tax reform that Governor Casey wanted. People thought it would mean a tax increase, and if there's anything you can count on Americans to be these last 10 years, it's selfish. She tries to pick an outfit suitable for seeing your son off to a drug clinic, and then babysitting for Roy all morning while Prue drives Nelson into North Philadelphia, which she's very nervous about. Who wouldn't be? They do terrible things now, deliberately rear-end you and then drive off with your car when you get out. There is no such thing anymore as a good Philadelphia neighborhood, and for a striking-looking younger woman like Prue is, it's worse. Prue hopes to be back by noon so Janice can go pick Harry up at the hospital. By 12:30 at the latest, the nurse on duty warned. They don't like to give them lunch that last day, and the girls coming round to make the beds don't like having somebody in one of them dirtying the sheets and then leaving. It makes her stomach nervous to think of Harry and his heart. Men are so fragile, it turns out. Though that nice Dr. Bright with all his freckles seemed delighted with what the balloon did, but Harry's image of himself has changed. He speaks of himself almost as if he's somebody he knew a long time ago, and he seems more of a baby than he ever did, letting her make all the decisions. She doesn't see how she can leave him alone in their house his first night out of the hospital, but she can't miss the quiz either. It really makes more sense with all this coming and going, and the children upset about their fathers going off to the rehab, to shift her base of operations to Mother's house, and to wear the smart light wool outfit she bought 2 years ago at the Wanamaker's out at the mall on the old fairgrounds. Didn't they used to get excited in school, getting the day off and all the rides, the one where 4 of you were in a kind of cylinder, and the boy opposite would be above you and then below, and the sky every which way, and your skirt doing heaven knows what, the smells of sawdust and cotton candy, and the freaks and animals and prizes for tossing little hoops at pegs that were bigger than they looked. A navy blue and white outfit, with a kicky blue pleated skirt and off-white satin jersey, and blue buttonless jacket with wide shoulders that always come back from the cleaners with the padding askew or bent or torn loose. It's a terrible fashion as far as dry cleaning goes. The first time she posed for Harry in that suit, he said it made her look like a little policeman. The shoulders and the piping on the pockets, she supposed, gave it the look of a uniform, but it would do all day, she thinks, from having not to break down in saying goodbye to Nelson to taking this quiz with all the strange old terms in it. Curtilage and messuage and sockage and fee simple and fee tail and fee and copyhold and customary freehold and mort main and devises and lex loci re citi. The little old elementary school desks have been uprooted and taken away in favor of one-armed chairs of combination aluminum tubing and orange plastic. But the old blackboards are still there, gray with chalk dust rubbed in over the years, and the high windows you have a pole to raise and lower, and those high floating lights like flattened moons, like big hollow flowers upside down on their thin stems. Janice loves being back in class again, trying to follow the teacher and learn new things, but also aware of the other students, their breathing and their feet scraping and the silent effort of their minds. The class is women 3 out of 4, and most younger than she, but not all. To her relief, she is not the oldest person in the class, and not the dumbest either. The years with their heartbreak and working off and on over at the lot have taught her some things. She wishes her parents were alive to see her, sitting with these 25 others, studying to get their licenses. The city sounds and Hispanic music and customized Hispanic cars violently revving on Pine Street beyond the tall windows, sitting there with her notebooks and pencils and yellow highlighter. They didn't have those when she went to high school. But of course, if they were alive, she wouldn't be doing this. She wouldn't have the mental space. They were wonderful parents, but had never trusted her to manage by herself, and her marrying Harry confirmed them in their distrust. She made bad decisions. The teacher, Mr. Lister, is a doleful, tall, rumpled man with jowls that make him look like a dog. He gave her a B on the last quiz and likes her, she can tell. The other students, even the younger ones, like her too, and lend her cigarettes in the bathroom break at 8:30, and invite her to come out with them for a beer afterward at 10. She hasn't accepted yet, but she might some night when things are more normal with Harry, just to show she's not stuck up. At least she hasn't let herself go to fat like some of the women her age in the class. Shocking, really, to see flesh piled up like that, and not doing anything to reduce, just carrying these hundreds of pounds back and forth and scarcely able to squeeze them into the desks. You wonder how long people can live like that. One of the few natural blessings God handed Janice was a tidy figure, and that she has tried to keep, for Harry's sake as well as her own. He does seem prouder of her the older they get. He looks at her sometimes as if she's just dropped down out of the moon. Even with hurrying this morning, she gets caught in the slow traffic through the thick of Brewer rush hour. All these cars, where are they going? By the side of the highway, as it heads around the side of the mountain, you can see erosion from last night's heavy rain. Big twisted ditches of red clay washed away, weeds and all. At Joseph Street she parks and goes up the walk, scared of what chaos she'll find. But Nelson is dressed in one of those putty-colored suits he has, and Prue in brown slacks, and a khaki-colored mannish shirt under a red cardigan sweater with the arms loosely knotted around her shoulders, an outfit to drive in. Both she and Nelson look pale and drawn. You can almost see the agitated psychic energy around their heads, like one of those manifestations Harry scoffs at on Unsolved Mysteries. In the kitchen, showing Janice the special peanut butter and honey sandwich she has made just the way Roy likes it. Otherwise he throws everything on the floor, even the tasty cake for dessert. Prue perhaps thinks the older woman notices something wrong in her manner and explains in a hurried, low voice, "Nelson had some coke hidden around the house and thought we should use it up before he goes. It was too much even for him, so I did a few lines. I honestly don't know what he sees in it. It burned and I sneezed and then couldn't fall asleep, but otherwise felt nothing. Nothing. I said to him, if this is all it is, I don't see any problem in giving it up. I'd have a harder time giving up Hershey bars." But just the fact that she is talking so much, confessing so freely, stroking the lank red hair back from her forehead with a caressing gesture of both hands, with trembling fingertips, indicates to Janice that there has been a chemical event. Her son is poisonous. Everything he touches. With all her maternal effort, she's brought destruction into the world. Nelson has stayed in the front room, sitting on the Barca-lounger with Roy in his arms, murmuring to the boy and gently blowing to tickle his ear. He looks up at his mother with offense written all over his face. He says to her, "You know why I'm doing this, don't you?" "To save your own life," Janice tells him, lifting the child out of his lap. Roy is growing heavier by the day, and she puts him down on his own legs. "Time you start making him walk," she explains to Nelson. "Just like you're making me go to this stupid, useless place," Nelson says. "I want that perfectly clear. I'm going because you're making me, and not because I admit I have any problem." A weight of weariness floods her, as if she is at the end and not the beginning of her day. "From what it seems you've done with the money, we all have a problem." The boy scarcely flinches, but does for an instant lower his eyelids with their beautiful lashes, a little long for a boy's. She has always found those lashes heartbreaking. "It's just debt," he says. "If Lyle weren't so sick now, he'd have explained it to you better. We were just borrowing against future income. It would have all worked out." Janice thinks of the quiz she must face tonight, and of poor Harry with that metal worm they put into his heart, and she tells her son, "Darling, you've been stealing, and not just pennies from the change jar. You're an addict. You've been out of your head. You've not been yourself for I don't know how long, and that's all any of us want, for you to be yourself again." His lips, thin like her own, tighten so as to disappear under his mustache that seems to be growing out, getting droopier. "I'm a recreational user just like you're a social drinker. We need it. We losers need a lift." "I'm not a loser, Nelson, and I hope you're not." She feels a tightness growing in her, but she tries to keep her voice low and level like Charlie would. "We had this same conversation in Florida, and you made promises then you didn't keep. Your problem is too much for me. It's too much for your wife. It's too much for your father. Much too much for him. Dad doesn't give a damn. He does. Don't interrupt. And your problem is too much for you. You need to go to this place where they've developed a method, where they're experienced. Your counselor wants you to go." "Ike says it's all a con. He says everything's a con." "That's just his black way of talking. He got you in. He wants you to go." "Suppose I can't stand it?" She and Harry never sent him off to summer camp, for fear he couldn't stand it. "You must stand it, or—" "Yeah, or what, Mom?" "Or else." He tries to mock her. "Oh, sure. What are you and Charlie and old Harry going to do to me? Put me in jail?" It is a real question. In nervousness he loudly sniffs and then rubs his pink nostrils. She tries to give him a real answer, saying in the level, soft voice, "We wouldn't be the ones doing it. The Toyota Company and the police would be doing it if they were called in." He sniffs again in disbelief. "Why would you call them in? I'll put the money back. I was always going to put it back. You care more about the dumb lot than you care about me." His tone is trying for a bantering lightness, but her own mood has hardened. Outrage has seized her, and self-righteousness. "You stole from me. Never mind that. But you stole from your grandfather. You stole from what he had built." Nelson's guarded eyes widen. His pallor seems a prisoner's in the murky parlor light. "Grandpop always wanted me to run the lot. And what about my kids? What about Judy and Roy if you carry through on all these threats?" Roy has whimpered and collapsed to the floor, and is leaning against her ankles, hoping to distract her, hating the sounds of this conversation. "You should have been thinking of them before now," Janice says stonily. "You've been stealing from them, too." She takes a weary pride in her stoniness. Her head is numb but clear, with the product of her own womb pleading and wriggling beneath her. This numbness, she feels, must be the power her women's group in Florida talks about, the power men have always had. Nelson tries outrage of his own. "Ah, fuck, Mom, don't give me all this. How could you do this to your mother and father? What about what you did to me, all that mess around when Becky died so I never had a sister? And then that time you ran away with your oily Greek and crazy dad brought Jill and then Skeeter into the house and they tried to make me take dope when I was just a little kid." Janice realizes that with all her stoniness and inner hardness she has been crying. Her throat feels raw, and tears have been flowing stupidly down her face. She wipes at them with the back of her hand and asks shakily, "How much dope did they make you do?" He squirms, retreats a bit. "I don't know," he says. "They let me take a puff of pot now and then, but they were doing worse stuff and didn't try to hide it from me." She works with a balled-up Kleenex at drying her face and eyes, thinking what a messy start she is having to this day, in a costume that was supposed to see her through the roles of mother, grandmother, ministering wife, eager student, and prospective working girl. "Your childhood, I guess, wasn't ideal," she admits, stabbing under her eyes, feeling distracted, ready for her next role. "But then whose is? You shouldn't sit in judgment of your parents. We did the best we could while being people, too." He protests. "Being people, too?" She tells him, "You know, Nelson, when you're little you think your parents are God, but now you're old enough to face the fact that they're not. Your father isn't well, and I'm trying to make something of what little life I have left, and we just can't focus on you and your misbehavior as much as you think we should. You're of an age now to take responsibility for your own life. It's plain to everybody who knows you that your only chance is to stick with this program in Philadelphia. We're all going to try to hold the fort here for 3 months, but when you come back in August you'll be on your own. You won't get any favors, at least from me." He sneers. "I thought mothers were supposed to love their kids no matter what." As if to challenge her physically, he pushes up out of his grandfather's Barcalounger and stands close, a few inches taller than she. She feels the rawness in her throat and the heat in her eyes beginning again. "If I didn't love you," she says, "I'd let you go on destroying yourself." Her store of words is exhausted. She launches herself toward the white sneering face and embraces the boy, who grudgingly, after a resistant wriggle, responds and hugs her back, patting her shoulder blade with what Harry's mother used to call those little Springer hands. Now, there, Janice thinks, was a hateful mother, who never said no to her son in all her life. Nelson is saying in her ear that he'll be fine, everything will be fine, he just got a little overextended. Prue comes downstairs carrying 2 big suitcases. "I don't know how often they wear suits," she says, "but I thought they must have a lot of physical therapy, so I packed all the shorts and athletic socks I could find, and blue jeans for when they make you scrub the floors." "Bye-bye, Daddy," Roy is saying down among their legs. Since Prue has her hands full, Janice hoists him up, heavy and leggy though he is getting to be, for his father's farewell kiss. The child hangs on to Nelson's ear in parting, and she wonders where Roy got this idea of inflicting pain to show affection. When his parents have gone off in the burgundy-red Celica Supra that Nelson drives, Roy leads his grandmother into the backyard, where Harry's old vegetable garden with the little chicken wire fence he could step over has been replaced with a swing and slide set bought 5 years ago for Judy and pretty well gone to rust and disuse. Already, though the summer is young, tall weeds flourish around the metal feet of it. Janice thinks she recognizes the ferny tops of carrots and kohlrabi among the plantain and dandelions, the dandelions' yellow flowers now seedy white pompons that fly apart at the swat of the broken hockey stick, whose taped-up handle little Roy swings like a samurai sword. The Springers moved to this house when Janice was 8, and from the backyard the big house looks naked to her without the copper beech. The sky is full of puffy, scudding clouds with those purply dark centers that can bring rain. The weatherman this morning had called for more, though not as violent as last night's showers. She takes Roy for a little walk over the sidewalk squares of Joseph Street, some of them replaced, but here and there a crack she remembers, still unmended, and 2 slabs still tilted up by a sycamore root in a way that made a treacherous little hill for a girl on roller skates. She tells Roy some of this and the names of families that used to live in the houses of the neighborhood, but he gets cranky and tired within the block. Children now don't seem to have the physical energy, the eagerness to explore that she remembers, girls as well as boys. Her knees always skinned and dirty, her mother always complaining about the state of her clothes. Roy's interest during their walk flickers up only when they come to a string of little soft ant-hills like coffee grounds between 2 sidewalk cracks. He kicks them open and then stamps the scurrying armies suddenly pouring out to defend the Queen. Such slaughter wearies him, the ants keep coming, and she finally has to pick the lummox up and carry him back to the house, his sneakers drumming sluggishly against her belly and pleated skirt. One of the cable channels has cartoons all morning. Gangs of outlined superheroes who move one body part at a time and talk with just their lower lips do battle in space with cackling villains from other galaxies. Roy falls asleep watching, one of Prue's oat-bran low-sugar cookies broken in 2 wet, crumbling halves in his hands. This house where Janice lived so long, the potted violets, the knick-knacks, the cracked brown barcalounger Daddy loved to relax on, to wait with closed eyes for one of his headaches to subside, the dining-room table Mother used to complain was being ruined by the lazy cleaning women who liked to spray on Pledge every time and ruin the finish with gummy wax build-up, deepens her guilt in regard to Nelson. His pale, frightened face seems still to glow in the dark living room. She pulls up the shade, surprising the sleepy wasps crawling on the sill like arthritic old men. Across the street at what used to be the Schmeling's house, a pink dogwood has grown higher than the porch roof. Its shape in bloom drifts sideways like those old photos of atomic bomb test clouds in the days when we were still scared of the Russians. To think that she could be so cruel to Nelson just because of money. The memory of her hardness with him makes her shake, chilling the something soft still left in the center of her bones, giving her a little physical convulsion of self-disgust, such as after you vomit. Yet no one will share these feelings with her. Not Harry, not Prue. Prue comes back not at noon, but after 1 o'clock. She says traffic was worse than anyone would imagine, miles of the turnpike reduced to 1 lane, North Philadelphia enormous, block after block of row houses. She says traffic was worse than anyone would imagine, miles of the turnpike reduced to 1 lane, North Philadelphia enormous, block after block of row houses. And then the rehab place took its own sweet time about signing Nelson in. When she complained, they let her know that they turned down 3 for every one they admitted. Prue seems a semi-stranger, taller in stature and fiercer in expression than Janice remembered as a mother-in-law. The link between them has been removed. "How did he seem?" Janice asks her. "Angry, but sane. Full of practical instructions about the lot he wanted me to pass on to his father. He made me write them all down. It's as if he doesn't realize he's not running the show anymore. I feel so terrible about it all, I couldn't eat any lunch. Roy fell asleep in the TV chair, and I didn't know if I should wake him or not." Prue pokes back her hair wearily. "Nelson kept the kids up too late last night, running around, kissing them, wanting them to play card games. He gets manicky on the stuff, so he can't let anybody alone. Roy has his play group at 1. I better quick take him." "I'm sorry. I knew he had the play group, but didn't know where it was or if Wednesday was one of the days. I should have told you, but who would have thought driving to Philadelphia and back would be such a big deal? In Ohio, you just zip up to Cleveland without any trouble." She doesn't directly blame Janice for missing Roy's play group, but a sternness in the triangular brow expresses irritation nevertheless. Janice still seeks absolution from this younger woman, asking, "Do you think I should feel so terrible?" Prue, whose eyes have been shuttling from detail to detail of what is, after all, as far as use and occupancy go, her house, now for a moment focuses on Janice a look of full, cold clarity. "Of course not," she says. "This is the only chance Nelson has, and you're the only one who could make him do it. Thank God you did. You're doing exactly the right thing." Yet the words are so harshly stated, Janice finds herself unreassured. She licks the center of her upper lip, which feels dry. There is a little crack in the center of it that never quite heals. "But I feel so, what's the word, mercenary, as if I care more about the company than my son." Prue shrugs. "It's the way things are structured. You have the clout. Me, Harry, the kids, Nelson just laughs at us. To him we're negligible. He's sick, Janice. He's not your son. He's a monster con artist who used to be your son." And this seems so harsh that Janice starts to cry. But her daughter-in-law, instead of offering to lend comfort, turns and sets about with her air of irritated efficiency, waking up Roy and putting him in clean corduroy pants for play school. "I'm late, too. We'll be back," Janice says, feeling dismissed. She and Prue have previously agreed that rather than risk leaving Harry alone in the Penn Park house while she does her 3 hours at the Penn State Extension, she will bring him back here for his first night out of the hospital. As she drives into Brewer, she looks forward to seeing him on his feet again and to sharing with him her guilt over Nelson. But he disappoints her just as Prue did. His 5 nights in St. Joseph's have left him self-obsessed and lackadaisical. He seems brittle and puffy suddenly. His hair, still a dull blonde color, has been combed by him in the same comb-ridged pompadour he used to wear coming out of the locker room in high school. His hair has very little gray, but his temples are higher, and the skin there, in the hollow at the corner of the eyebrows, has a crinkly dryness. He is like a balloon the air just slowly goes out of. Over days it wrinkles and sinks to the floor. His russet slacks and blue cotton sports coat look loose on him. The hospital diet has squeezed pounds of water out of his system. Drained of spirit as well, he seems halting and blinky the way her father became in his last 5 years, closing his eyes in the Barca-lounger, waiting for the headache to pass. It feels wrong. In their marriage in the past, Harry's vitality always towered over hers. His impulsive needs, his sense of being generally cherished, his casual ability to hurt her, his unspoken threat to leave at any moment. It feels wrong that she is picking him up in her car when he is dressed and wet-combed like the boy that comes for you on a date. He was sitting meekly in the chair by his bed with his old gym bag, holding medicine and dirty underwear between his feet in their big suede hush-puppies. She took his arm, and with cautious steps he moved to the elevator as the nurses called goodbye. One plump younger one seemed especially sad to see him go, and the Hispanic culinary aide said to Janice with flashing eyes, "Make him eat right." She expects Harry to be more grateful, but a man even slightly sick assumes that women will uphold him, and in this direction, men to women, the flow of gratitude is never great. In the car, his first words are insulting. "You have on your policeman's uniform." "I need to feel presentable for my exam tonight. I'm afraid I won't be able to concentrate. I can't stop thinking about Nelson. He has slumped down in the passenger seat, his knees pressed against the dashboard, his head laid back against the headrest in a conceited way. "What's to think?" he asks. "Did he wriggle out of going? I thought he'd run." He didn't run at all. That was one of the things that made it so sad. He went off just the way he used to go to school. Harry, I wonder if we're doing the right thing. Harry's eyes are closed, as if against the battering of sights to see through the car windows. Brewer, its painted brick buildings, its heavy sandstone churches, its mighty courthouse, its new little green-glass skyscraper, and the overgrown park where Weiser Square had once been, and which is now the home of drug addicts and the homeless who live in cardboard boxes and keep their clothes in stolen shopping carts. "What else can we do?" he asks indolently. "What does Prue think?" "Oh, she's for it. It gets him off her hands. I'm sure he's been a handful lately. You can see in her mind she's single already, all independent and brisk and a little rude to me, I thought." "Don't get touchy. What does Charlie think? How was your Vietnamese dinner last night?" "I'm not sure I understand Vietnamese food, but it was nice. Short but sweet. I even got home in time to catch the end of 30-something. It was the season finale. Gary tried to protect Susanna from a magazine exposé being written by Hope, who found out that Susanna was stealing from the social service center. All this in case he thinks she slept with Charlie, to show there wasn't time. Poor Harry. He doesn't believe you can grow beyond that. He groans, still keeping his eyes shut. Sounds awful. Sounds like life. "Charlie's real proud of me," she says, "for standing up to Nelson. We had a grim little talk this morning, Nelson and me, where he said I loved the company more than him. I wonder if he isn't right, if we haven't become very materialistic since you first knew me. He seemed so little, Harry, so hurt and defiant, just the way he was the time I went off to live with Charlie. Abandoning a 12-year-old like that, I'm the one should have been put in jail. What was I thinking of? It's true what he says. Who am I to lecture him, to send him off to this dreary place? I was just about the age he is now when I did it, too. So young, really." She is crying again. She wonders if you can become addicted to tears like everything else. All the darkness and fumbling and unthinkable shames of her life feel regurgitated in this unstoppable, salty outpour. She can hardly see to drive, and laughs at her own snuffling. Harry's head rolls loosely on the headrest, as if he is basking in an invisible sun. The clouds are crowding out even light gray sky, their dark hearts merging into an overcast. "You were trying something out," Harry tells her. "You were trying to live while you were still alive." "But I had no right. You had no right either to do the things we did." "For Christ's sake, don't bawl. It was the times," he says. "The 60s. The whole country was flipping out back then. We weren't so bad. We got back together." "Yes, and sometimes I wonder if that wasn't just more self-indulgence. We haven't made each other happy, Harry." She wants to face this with him, but he smiles as if in his sleep. "You've made me happy," he says. "I'm sorry to hear it didn't work both ways." "Don't," she says, "don't just score points. I'm trying to be serious. You know I've always loved you, or wanted to, if you'd let me. Ever since high school, at least ever since Kroll's. That's one of the things Charlie was telling me last night, how crazy about you I've always been." Her face heats. His failure to respond embarrasses her. She hurries on, turning left on Eisenhower. A gap in the clouds makes the hood of the Camry glare. Then it is dipped deeper into cloud shadow. "It really was a pretty restaurant," she says, "the way they've fixed it up and everything. These little Vietnamese women so petite they made me feel like a horse. But they spoke perfect English with Pennsylvania accents. Second generation, can it be? Has it been that long since the war? We should go there sometime." "I wouldn't dream of intruding. It's your and Charlie's place." He opens his eyes and sits up. "Hey, where are we going? This is the way to Mount Judge." She says, "Harry, now don't get mad. You know I have to go to class and take the quiz tonight, and I'd feel too funny leaving you alone for 3 hours just out of the hospital. So Prue and I worked it out that you and I would sleep in Mother's old bed, which they moved across the hall into the old sewing room when Mother's room became Judy's room. This way you'll have babysitters while I'm off." "Why can't I go to my own fucking house? I was looking forward to it." I lived in that damn barn of your mother's for 15 years, and that was enough. Just for one night, honey. Please, otherwise I'll be sick with worry and flunk my quiz. There are all those Latin and funny old English words you're expected to know. My heart's fine, better than ever. It's like a sink trap after all the hair and old toothpaste has been cleaned out. I saw the bastards do it. Nothing will happen if you leave me alone, I promise. That nice Dr. Bright told me before they did it there was a chance of a coronary occlusion. That was while they were doing it, with the catheter in. The catheter's out now. It's been out nearly a week. Come on, honey, take me home. Just one night, Harry, please. It's a kindness to everybody. Prue and I thought it would distract the children from their father's not being there. They can think they're helping take care of you. He sinks back into his seat, giving up. What about my pajamas? What about my toothbrush? They're there. I brought them over this morning. I tell you, this day, I've really had to plan. Now, after we've got you settled, I must study, absolutely. I don't want to be in the same house with Roy, he says, sulking humorously, resigned to what, after all, is a tiny adventure, a night back in Mount Judge. He'll hurt me. Down in Florida, he yanked the oxygen tube right out of my nose. Janice remembers Roy stamping on all those ants, but nevertheless says, I spent the whole morning with him, and he couldn't have been sweeter. Prue and Roy are not there. Janice leads Rabbit upstairs and suggests he lie down. Ma's old bed has been freshly made up. His off-white pajamas are folded nicely on his pillow. He sees in the murky far corner, next to an old wooden-cased Singer sewing machine, the dressmaker's dummy, dust-colored, eternally headless and erect. Ma's big bed crowds the room, so there are just a few inches of space on one side next to the window, and on the other beside the wall with its wainscoting. The sewing room has a wainscoting of varnished beaded boards, set upright and trimmed at chest level with a strip of molding. The door of a shallow closet in the corner is made of the same boards. When he opens it, the door bumps annoyingly on the bedpost of Ma's old bed, a bedpost turned with a flattened knob at the top like a hard brown-painted mushroom, and the paint on it has crackled into small rectangles, like a puddle that has dried. He opens the door to hang up his blue coat, among cobwebby, crammed old irons and toasters, coverlets folded and preserved in yellowing cellophane moth bags, and a rack of Fred Springer's dead neckties. He folds back his shirt sleeves and begins to feel like himself. The idea of spending a day back in Mount Judge is beginning to amuse him. Maybe I'll take a little walk. Should you? Janice asks. Absolutely. It's the best thing for you. That's what everybody at the hospital says. They had me walking the halls. I thought you might want to lie down. Later, maybe. You go study. Go on. This quiz of yours is making me nervous. He leaves her at the dining-room table with her book and her photocopies and heads up Joseph Street to Potter Avenue, where the ice plant water used to run down in the gutter. The gutter has been long dry, but the cement was permanently tinged green. Rabbit walks away from the center of the borough with its dry cleaners and Turkey Hill Minute Market and Pizza Hut and Sunoco and discount stereo and new video store that used to be a shoe store and aerobics class above what had been a bakery when he was a boy. The smell of warm dough and icing out of its doors would make him drool. He walks uphill to where Potter Avenue meets Wilbur Street. Here a green mailbox used to lean on a concrete post, and now the bigger boxy kind with the rounded top stands instead, painted blue. A fire hydrant painted red, white, and blue for the bicentennial in the 70s has been given a fresh and garish coat of the orange you see on life jackets and joggers' vests and hunters' outfits, as if a fog creeping into our way of life is making everything harder to see. He walks up Wilbur, feeling the steep slope tug at his heart. The street in its lower blocks holds pretentious large houses like the Springers, stucco and brick and slate, fortress-like, with gables and acres of roof, some of them now split up into condos reached by wooden outside stairs that look tacky. Beyond the alley, where long ago there used to be a telephone pole with a backboard bolted to it, Rabbit's chest has that full feeling, his ribs like bands of pressure, and he pops a nitrostat under his tongue and waits, while cool cloud shadows slide rapidly across the forested edge of the mountain above him, for the relief and the tingle. He had hoped he would need to take fewer pills, but maybe it takes time for the operation to sink in. He continues hiking, alone on the sloping sidewalk, up into the block where he and Janice lived when they were first married. Built all at once in the 30s, a row of frame semi-detached climbs the hill like a staircase. Like the fire hydrant, they have become brighter, painted in fanciful storybook colors, pale purple and lime green, even turquoise and scarlet, colors that no respectable Pennsylvania householder would have applied when Harry was young. Life was not only bigger but more solemn then. Colors were bruise and dung, in gritty sidings that rubbed off on your fingers and were tar underneath. His own house, the 7th in the row, number 447, had tired wooden steps that have been replaced with concrete inset with irregular multicolored pieces of broken tile, and covered with a central runner of green outdoor carpeting. The house door into the vestibule has been painted a high-gloss ochre on its panels and maroon on its stiles, so a bold double cross is figured forth, ornamented by a brass knocker in the shape of a fox's head. Camaros and BMWs are parked out front. Glass curtains and splashy abstract prints dress the windows. This row, a kind of slum when Harry and Janice and 2-year-old Nelson lived here, and their infant daughter died, has been spruced up. Festive yuppie money has taken it over. These apartments are fashionable, high above the town as they are. Back then, 30 years ago, from the 3rd floor, the view across the tar rooftops to the peaked houses and parked cars lower down just seemed an enlargement of their discontent, their defeat, a sense of defeat the years have brought back to him, after what seemed for a while to be triumphs. There had been, being here makes him remember, those cheap sliding screens out the windows, and a rusty furnace odor in the vestibule, and a plastic clown some kid had left in the dirt under the front porch steps, now concrete carpeted green like those traffic islands down at the condo. This row used to end Wilbur Street. Development had stopped at a gravel turnaround, and an abandoned gravel quarry made the transition to the mountain's shaggy backside. Now a double row, not quite new, of shingled condominiums, with strangely exaggerated chimneys and gables like houses in a child's storybook, occupies still higher ground. The windows and doors and trim boards of these condos are tinted in pale and playful colors. The plantings and little lawns are still tenuous. Last night's downpour washed from the deforested acres of the mountain reddish mud that has drifted, hardening, all along the fresh curbs and overflowed onto the street's blue-black asphalt. We're using it all up, Harry thinks. The world. He turns and walks downhill. On Potter Avenue he continues past Joseph and goes into a Turkey Hill Minute Market, and to suppress his melancholy buys a 99-cent bag of corn chips. Net weight 6 1/4 ounces, 177 grams, manufactured by Keystone Food Products, Incorporated, Easton, Pennsylvania, 18042, USA. Ingredients: corn, vegetable oil, contains one or more of the following oils: peanut, cottonseed, corn, partially hydrogenated soybean, salt. Doesn't sound so bad. Keep on crunchin', the crinkly pumpkin-colored bag advises him. He loves the salty ghost of Indian corn, and the way each thick flake, an inch or so square, solider than a potato chip, and flatter than a Frito, and less burny to the tongue than a triangular red-peppered Dorito, sits edgy in his mouth and then shatters and dissolves between his teeth. There are certain things you love putting into your mouth: nibs, good and plenties, dry-roasted peanuts, lima beans cooked not too soft, and the rest is more or less disagreeable mush, or meat that gives the teeth too tough a fight, and if you think about it, almost makes you gag. Ever since childhood, Rabbit has had mixed feelings about eating, especially the creatures that not too long ago were living just like you. Sometimes he imagines he can taste the terror of the axe in the slice of turkey or chicken, and the happy snorting and wallowing in pork, and the stupid monotony of a cow's life in beef, and in lamb a hint of urine like that whiff from Thelma's face in the hospital. Her dialysis now, and their night in that tropical hut, bodily fluids. But there were limits to what bodies can do, and limits of involvement, what with Janice and Ron and the kids, and fussy living rooms all over Diamond County. and some limitation within him really, a failure or refusal to love any substance but his own. And she, too, she did tend afterwards to be curiously severe with him, as though he had become disgusting now that she had eaten, his sour milk smell tainting her satisfied mouth. His meat having been eaten by her, and now she being eaten by all that microscopic chewing from within. Lupus means wolf, she had told him, one of the autoimmune diseases in which the body attacks itself. Antibodies attack your own tissue, self-hatred of a sort. Thinking of Thelma, Harry feels helpless, and in his helplessness hard-hearted. The corn chips, as he walks along the pavement, begin to accumulate in his gut into a knotted muchness, a little ball of acid, and yet he cannot resist putting just one more into his mouth, to feel its warped, salty edges, its virgin crunchiness on his tongue, between his teeth, among these salivating membranes. By the time he gets back to 89 Joseph, behind its wall of sticky, leafed-out Norway maples, he has consumed the full bag, even the fragments of salt and corn small enough for an ant to carry back to his brown queen bloated in her maze beneath the sidewalk. He has wrapped himself around all 6 1/4 ounces of sheer poison, pure sludge in his arteries, an oily aftertaste in his throat and between his teeth. He hates himself with a certain relish. Janice is working at the dining-room table, making lists for herself to memorize. When she looks up, her eyes have a rubbed, frowning look, and her mouth is open a dark slot. He hates to see it, hates to see her struggling so hard not to be dumb. His long walk has left him so tired he goes upstairs and takes off his slacks to keep the crease, and lies down on Ma Springer's bed, on top of the covers but under the Amish quilt, a patchwork quilt that releases to his nostrils a memory of how Ma smelled toward the end, musty, far odor of fleshly corners gone unwashed. He finds himself suddenly scared to be out of the hospital whiteness, the antisepsis, the halls of softly clattering concern focused upon him. Sick him. He must have fallen asleep, for when he opens his eyes the day has a different tone through the room's single window, a cooler shadowed menace, the rain coming closer, the clouds and tree-tops merging. From the sounds downstairs, Prue and both children are home, and footsteps move about in the hall outside, much as years ago he would hear Melanie and Nelson sneak back and forth at night. It is not night, it is late afternoon. The children, home from school, have been instructed to be quiet because Grandpa is sleeping, but they are unable to resist the spurts of squalling and of glee that come over them. Life is noise. Rabbit's stomach hurts. He forgets why. After they hear him make a trip down the hall to the bathroom, they come and visit him, the poor little semi-orphans. Their 4 eyes, 2 green, 2 brown, feast on him from the bed's edge. Judy's face seems longer and graver than it was in Florida. She will have an angstrom leanness, a hunted look. Her dress is lilac-colored with white smocking. Does he imagine a touch of extra redness to her lips? Does Prue allow that? Certainly the child's hair has been given an artificial wave, a carrot-colored crimp. She asks, "Grandpa, did it hurt in the hospital?" "Not much, Judy. It hurt my feelings mostly to be there at all." "Did they fix that thing inside you?" "Oh, yes. Don't you worry about that. My doctor says I'm better than ever." "How come you're in bed, then?" "Because Grandma was studying for her quiz, and I didn't want to bother her." "She says you're going to sleep over." "Looks that way, doesn't it? A pajama party. Before you were born, Judy, Grandma and I lived here for years and years with your great-grandmother Springer. You remember her?" The child's eyes stare, their green intensified by the maple trees at the window. "A little bit. She had fat legs and wore thick orange stockings." "That's right. But can Ma be no more than that in this child's memory? Do we dwindle so fast to next to nothing?" "I used to hate her stockings," Judy goes on, as if sensing his need for more and trying to meet it. "Those were sup-hose," Harry explains. "And she wore funny little round glasses she never took off. She'd let me play with the case. It snapped." Roy, bored to hear all this about a woman he never met, begins to talk. His round face strains upward as if he's trying to swallow something rough, and his arched eyebrows pull his dark, shiny eyes painfully open. "Daddy, Daddy won't—" or perhaps he said went. He seems unable to wrestle his thoughts into shape, and begins again with the strained word, "Daddy." Impatiently, Judy gives him a push. He falls against a bedpost, there in the narrow space between the mattress edge and the beaded wainscoting. "Shut up if you can't talk," she tells him. "Daddy's in a rehab place getting better." The child has hit his head. He stares at his grandfather as if waiting to be told what to do. "Ouch," Harry says for him, and sitting up against Ma Springer's old brown headboard opens his arms to the child. Roy dives against his chest and lets himself bawl about his hurt head. His hair, when Harry rubs it, is stickily fine like Janice's yesterday when she cried. Something about being helpless in bed, people hit you up for sympathy. They've got you where they want you. Judy talks right through Roy's aggrieved noise. "Grandpa, want to watch one of my videos with me? I have Dumbo and The Sound of Music and Dirty Dancing." "I'd love to see Dirty Dancing sometime. I've seen the other two, but shouldn't you be doing your homework before dinner?" The child smiles. "That's what Daddy always says. He never wants to watch a video with me." She looks at Roy being cradled and pulls at her brother's arm. "Come on, stupid. Don't lean on Grandpa's chest. You'll hurt him." They go away. A ghostly moment as Judy stood by the bed reminded him of Jill, another of the many dead people he knows. The numbers are growing. Life is like a game they used to play on the elementary school playground, Fox in the Morning. You all lined up on one side of the asphalt area marked out for games. One person was it, and that one would call out, "Fox in the Morning," and you would all run to the other side, and it would grab one victim from the running throng and drag him or her into the circle painted on the asphalt. And then there would be two its, and these would capture a few more on the next massed gallop from safety to safety, and these four would become 8. And soon a whole mob would be roving the center. The proportions were reversed. The last person left uncaught became it for the next game. Sparse specks of rain have appeared on the panes. His eyelids feel heavy again. A fog within is rising up to swallow his brain. When you are sleepy, an inner world smaller than a seed in sunlight expands and becomes irresistible, breaking the shell of consciousness. It is so strange. There must be some other way of being alive than all this eating and sleeping, this burning and freezing, this sun and moon. Day and night blend into each other, but still are nothing the same. The call to dinner comes from far away, through many thicknesses of lath and plaster and hollow air, and from its sharp tone is being repeated. He can't believe he's been asleep. No time has passed. Just a thought or two took a strange elastic shape as it went around a corner. His mouth feels furry. The specks of rain on the window are still few enough to be counted. He recalls remembering today the window screens they had in the Wilbur Street apartment, the kind you used to buy in hardware stores before combination storms made them obsolete. They never precisely fit, leaving splinters of light through which the mosquitoes and midges could crawl. But that wasn't the something tragic about them. Tragedy lay in a certain filtered summer breath they admitted, the glint of sun along segments of the mesh, an overlooked fervor in their details, the bent screening, the sliding adjustable frame stamped with the manufacturer's name, the motionless molding of the window itself, like the bricks that all through Brewer loyally hold their pattern, though the masons that laid them long ago are dead. Something tragic in matter itself that keeps watch no matter how great our misery. He went back to the apartment that day after Becky died, and nothing was changed. The water in the tub, the chops in the skillet. The call to dinner repeats again, closer, in Janice's sharp voice at the foot of the stairs. "Harry, dinner!" "Coming, for Christ's sake," he says. Janice called, but the meal was cooked by Prue. It is light, delicious, healthful. Pieces of some white fish garnished with parsley and chives, and flavored with pepper and lemon. Asparagus served steaming in a rectangular microwave dish, and in a big wooden bowl a salad including celery and carrot slices and dates and green grapes. The salad bowl and microwave equipment are new since Ma Springer died. Everybody eats, but nobody has much to say except Janice, who chatters on bravely about her quiz, her class, the people in it, some of them women like herself developing midlife careers, and others young people that seem much the way we were in the 50s, running scared economically and playing everything safe. She mentions her teacher, Mr. Lister, and Judy laughs out loud at the name, repeating it, the rhyme of it. "Don't laugh, Judy, he has such a sad face," Janice says. Judy tells some involved story about what a boy at school did today. He accidentally spilled paint for a poster they were making all over the floor, and when the teacher bawled him out, took the spilled jar and shook it at her so some got on her dress. Meanwhile, there is this one black boy in the class. His family has just moved to Mount Judge from Baltimore, and he was painting his face all over with these designs that have a secret meaning, he said. Her talk is a little like her excited channel flipping, and it occurs to Harry that she is making it up or confusing her own classroom with classroom shows she has seen on television. Prue asks Harry how he is feeling. He says fine. His breathing does feel freer since the operation, the procedure, the doctors like to call it, and his memory, for that matter, better. He wonders how soft in the head he was getting before without realizing it. Really, he says, apologizing to her for her trouble, thanking her for the good, healthy meal that he has managed to get down on top of the fermenting lump of corn chips. He could perfectly well have been left alone in his own house tonight. Janice says she knows it is probably foolish, but she could never forgive herself if he took a bad turn while she was in class, and how could she concentrate on leans and curtilage and lex loci, thinking he was back in the house drowning. The other adults at the table hold their breaths at this slip. Harry gently says when the silence gets unbearable, "You don't mean drowning?" And Janice asks, "Did I say drowning?" knowing now in her ears recall that she did. Harry sees that she only seems to have forgotten Rebecca, that in her own mind she is always and will always be the woman who drowned her own baby, 30 years ago. It was this time of year, late spring. They are approaching the anniversary in June. Janice rises, flustered, blushing, shamed. "Who wants coffee besides me?" she asks, all eyes upon her, like an actress who must come up with some line. "And there's some butter pecan ice cream for dessert if anybody wants," Prue says, her flat Ohio voice having fallen over the years into the local locutions, that considerate Pennsylvania way of speaking as if to make things clear in a stupefying haze. She has taken off the cardigan and folded back the cuffs of her mannish khaki shirt, so that half her downy freckled forearms show, there at the kitchen table, under the faceted glass light fixture overhead. "My favorite flavor," Harry says, pitying his wife, wanting to help her out of the brightly lit center of the stage. Even little Roy with his inky eyes is staring at Janice, sensing something strange, a curse nobody mentions. "Harry, that's the worst possible thing for you," Janice says, grateful for this opportunity he has given her for a quarrel, a scene. "Ice cream and nuts both." Prue says, "I got some frozen yogurt with Harry in mind. Peach and banana, I think, are the flavors." "It's not the same," Harry says, clowning to keep the attention of both women. "I want butter pecan, with something. How about some good old-fashioned apple strudel with all that sort of wallpaper paste inside, or some sticky buns, or shoe-fly pie? Yum, huh, Roy?" "Oh, Harry, you're going to kill yourself," Janice cries, excessively, her grief centered elsewhere. "There's something called ice milk," Prue is saying, and he feels that her heart, too, is elsewhere, that throughout the meal she has been maneuvering around the covered-up hole of Nelson's absence, which no one has mentioned, not even the wide-eyed children. "Shoe-fly pie," Roy says, in an oddly deep and mannish voice, and when they explain to him that there isn't really any, that it was just a joke of Grandpa's, he feels he has made a mistake, and in his weariness at learning all day to be more independent, he begins to whimper. "Makes your eyes light up," Rabbit sings to him, "and your tummy say howdy." Prue takes Roy upstairs, while Janice serves Judy butter pecan ice cream and stacks the dishes into the dishwasher. Harry kept his spoon and digs into Judy's dish while Janice's back is turned. He loves that second when the tongue flattens the ice cream against the roof of the mouth and the fragments of pecan emerge like stars at evening. "Oh, Grandpa, you shouldn't," Judy says, looking at him with genuine fright, though her lips want to smile. He touches his own lips with a finger and promises just one spoonful while going for another. The child calls for help. "Grandma!" He's just teasing, Janice says, but asks him, "Would you like your own dish?" This gets him up from the table. "I shouldn't have ice cream. That's the worst thing for me," he tells her, and scolds, seeing the jumble of plates she has stacked in Prue's, Ma's old dishwasher. "My God, you have no system. Look at all the space you're wasting." "You stack it, then," she says, a modern woman, and while he does, fitting the dishes closer together in harrow-like rows, she gathers together her papers and book and purse from the dining-room table. "Damn," she says, and comes to the kitchen to tell Harry, "All my planning this morning what to wear, and I forget to bring a raincoat." The rain has settled in outside, sheathing the house in a loud murmur. "Maybe Prue could lend you one." "It would fall off me," she says. But she goes upstairs to where Prue is putting Roy to bed, and after a conversation Harry can't hear, comes down in a cherry-red waterproof plastic coat, with wide lapels and a belt too long and gleaming zigzags under the light. "Do I look ridiculous?" "Not exactly," he tells her. It excites him, this transposition. You follow the zigzagging creases up, expecting to see red-haired Prue staring back, and instead it's Janice's middle-aged face, framed in a splashy bandana, not hers either. "Also, damn, I'm so mad at myself, I left my lucky pen on the upstairs table back home, and there's no time to drive back for it in all this rain." "Maybe you're taking all this too seriously," he says. "What are you trying to prove to the teacher?" "I'm trying to prove something to myself," she says. "Tell Prue I've left and that I'll be back at 10:30, maybe 11 if we decide to go out for beers afterward. You go to bed and rest. You look tired, honey." She gives him in parting a pointed little lingering kiss, grateful for something, glad to go. All these other male advisers she suddenly has, Charlie, Mr. Lister, the new accountant, seem an invasion as devious as that televised catheter nudging forward into his shadowy webbed heart. The murmur around the house sounds louder after Janice's footsteps on the porch and the sound of the Camry starting up. She has a panicky way of racing the engine before she puts a car in gear, and usually jumps off like a drag racer. Janice is wrapped in Prue's red raincoat, and he is the man of Prue's house. On the set in the living room, he and Judy watch the end of ABC News on Channel 6. That Peter Jennings, here he is telling Americans all about America, and he still says about for about. He's so Canadian. And then, with Judy punching the remote control, they skip back and forth between Jeopardy and Simon and the 7 o'clock syndicated reruns of Cosby and Cheers. Prue drifts downstairs, having put Roy down, and into the kitchen to tidy up totally after Janice's half-assed job, and then through the dining room checking that all the windows are shut against the rain, and into the sunroom where she picks a few dead leaves off the plants on Ma Springer's old iron table there. Finally she comes into the living room and sits on the old sofa beside him while Judy in the Barcalounger channel surfs. On the Cosby Show rerun, the Huxtables are having one of those child-rearing crises bound to dissolve like a lump of sugar in their warm good humor, their mutual lovingness. Vanessa and her friends get all excited about entering a local dance contest, with lip-syncing, and get instruction from an old black nightclub pianist, and when the time comes to demonstrate for their parents in their living room, they bump and grind with a sexuality so startling and premature that Mrs. Huxtable, Claire, in real life the terrific Felicia Rashad, married to the frog-eyed black sports commentator, restores decency, stopping the record and sending the girls back upstairs. Yet with that smile of hers, that wide, white, slightly lippy black woman smile, implying that indecency is all right in its place, its wise time, as in one of those mutually ogling Huxtable snuggles that end many a Cosby show. Beside him on the sofa, Prue is staring at the screen with a jewel, a tear glittering in a corner of the eye toward him. From the Barcalounger, Judy snaps the channel to a shot of tropical sky and a huge turtle turning its head slowly while a godlike voiceover intones, "Determined to defend its breeding grounds." "God damn it, Judy, put it back to the Cosbys right now," Harry says, furious less for himself than for Prue, to whom the show seemed to be a vision of lost possibilities. Judy, startled just like the girls on the show, does put it back, but by now it's a commercial, and she cries as the insult sinks in, "I want Daddy back. Everybody else is mean to me." She starts to cry. Prue rises to comfort her. Rabbit retreats in disgrace. He circles the house, listening to the rain, marveling that he once lived here, remembering the dead and the dead versions of the living who lived here with him, finding a half-full jar of dry-roasted cashews on a high kitchen shelf, and on the kitchen television set, a cable rerun of last night's playoff game between the Knicks and the Bulls. He hates the way Michael Jordan's pink tongue rolls around in his mouth as he goes up for a dunk. He has seen Jordan interviewed. He's an intelligent guy. Why does he swing his tongue around like an imbecile? The few white players there are on the floor look pathetically naked, their pasty sweat, their fuzzy armpit hair. It seems incredible to Harry that he himself was ever out there in the game, though in those days the shorts were a little longer and the tank-top armholes not quite so big. He has finished off the jar of cashews without noticing, and suddenly the basketball, Jordan changing direction in midair not once but twice and sinking an awkward fallback jumper with Ewing's giant hand square in his face, pains him with its rubbery activity, an extreme of bodily motion his nerves but not his muscles can remember. He needs a nitrostat from the little bottle in the coat jacket in that shallow closet upstairs. The hauntedness of the downstairs is getting to him. He turns off the kitchen light and holds his breath, passing Ma Springer's old break front in the darkened dining room, where the wallpaper crawls with the streetlight projections of rain running down the windows. In the upstairs hall he hears from Ma's old room, now Judy's, the murmur of a television set, and dares tap the door and push in. The little girl has been put into a sleeveless nightie, and, holding her stuffed dolphin, sits propped up on 2 pillows while her mother sits on the bed beside her. The TV set flickering at the foot of the bed picks out pale patches, the whites of Judy's eyes, her bare shoulders, the dolphin's belly, Prue's long forearms laid across the child's flat chest. He clears his throat and says, "Hey, Judy, sorry if I got a bit mean down there." With a hushing, impatient hand motion she indicates that her grandfather is forgiven, and ought to come in and watch with them. In the blue, unsteady light, he picks out a child's straight chair and brings it close to the bed and lowers himself to it. He virtually squats. Raindrops glint on the panes in the light from Joseph Street. He looks at Prue's profile for the glint of a tear, but her face is composed, her nose sharp, her lips clamped together. They are watching unsolved mysteries. Pale, overweight American faces float into the camera's range, earnestly telling of UFOs seen over sugar beet fields, above shopping malls, in Navajo reservations, while the plaid furniture and striped wallpaper of their homes, exposed to the glaring lights the cameras require, have the detailed hard weirdness of diatoms seen under a microscope. Harry is struck by how well, really, the small-town sheriffs and trailer camp housewives, and even the drifters and dropouts who just happened to be tripping out on a deserted picnic grounds when the giant minds commanding the UFOs decided to land and sample the terrestrial fauna, speak. A nation of performers, of smoothly talking heads, has sprung up under the lights, everybody rehearsed for their 30 seconds of nationwide attention. During the commercials, Judy skips to other channels, to Jacques Cousteau in a diving suit, to Porky Pig in his big-buttoned blue vest. Odd, those old cartoon animals all going around with bare bottoms. To a stringy-haired rock singer mouthing his mic in a lathered-up agony like a female porn star approaching a blowjob. To a courtroom scene where the judge's shifty eyes in a second show that he is in on a deal. A hummingbird beating its surprisingly flexible wings in slow motion. Angela Lansbury looking shocked. Greer Garson looking gently out of focus in black and white. And back to unsolved mysteries, now about an infant who disappeared from a New York hospital, making Robert Stack, in his mystical raincoat, extra quizzical. Having been rude before, Rabbit holds his tongue. He feels fragile. The flickering images bear down upon him, relentless as heartbeats. With the mystery of the vanished baby still unsolved, he rises and kisses Judy good night, his face gliding past the bigger one next to hers. "Love you, Grandpa," the child mechanically says, forgiving or forgetful. "Lights are off downstairs," he mutters to Prue.